talk about ideology, self-interest, and their involvement in the Bay of Pigs invasion.
The invasion in which thousands of pigs attacked people in the side of the beach.
No, Santi, the Bay of Pigs was actually one of the main events that increased tension between Cuba and the US during the Cold War. It consisted of an attack of the CIA in 1961 to a Cuban bay located in the southwest of the island, Bahía de Cochinos.
Ah, that Bay of Pigs. Well, the CIA sent 1,300 soldiers to invade Cuba. They entered, as you mentioned before, Bahía de Cochinos through the sea. They stopped at Playa Larga, where they later moved into land. Their army went decreasing every time there was a small battle in little towns. From the soldiers that invaded, 1,000 went to jail in Cuba, 200 were killed, and 100 escaped.
Here is some background information according to Gerald Kurland on his book Bay of Pigs Invasion. At the very beginning of Castro's regime in 1959, 600 officials of Batista's dictatorship were executed for war crimes in sports arenas with Cuban people screaming for blood. In February 16th of the same year, Castro named himself president, and through a 14-month period, he started removing democracy and implementing communism. He also attempted to begin a revolution through Latin America. Furthermore, in May 1959, Castro implemented an agrarian reform law that broke up American plantations in Cuba and gave them to their poor people. By 1960, Cuba seized $1 billion worth of American savings and didn't intend to pay back. And they also made accusations on national TV saying that the US wanted to overthrow Castro's government and implement Batistas again.
Previously to all this, didn't Fidel Castro say, "We want to establish in Cuba a true democracy without trace of fascism, Peronism, or communism"?
Indeed, which is why self-interest and ideology, which are part of the 5 keys, influenced the US when taking extreme measures to invade, in order to stop communism from spreading throughout the world. Fidel Castro swore that he had intentions of implementing a democratic rule. However, when they realized that this was not the case, through the causes stated previously, they acted recklessly. The ideology of the US was extremely based around capitalism. The use of propaganda became very popular during the Cold War, and the 2 main ideologies involved, communism and capitalism, managed to use it effectively. Well, this clip is an example of a capitalist propaganda produced by the US.
Can't we agree that capitalism is an economic system, a system for the production and distribution of things we need and want?
I won't agree to that. Not until you say something about government, too. There has to be a legal basis for any economic system to operate.
Well, it's easy to see that you have different ideas of what capitalism is. Maybe we should talk about what it is not. It is not a system of strict governmental control and planning in which a dictator or board tells people what jobs they may hold and what goods they may produce.
And it's not a system of government ownership.
Videos of this sort were shown to high school students, and as you can see in both propaganda extracts, they try to convince everyone that capitalism is what individuals needed in the context of the Cold War. While communism was seen as a non-liberal ideology in which the government had complete control of the individual's actions, the US believed that communism was anti-democratic. Since the US had businesses up to $1 billion in Cuba, their self-interest was directly affected by Cuban communist beliefs. In an act of desperation towards the seizement and nationalization of other companies, they decided that Cuba had to be stopped. Eisenhower attempted to suspend a quote of $150 million that the US would give Cuba for their sugar, but Congress didn't approve of his plan. Indeed, but don't forget the 5 keys, which are self-interest, ideology, natural resources, industrial development, and finally, the role of the individual. The most related one to our subject, however, are self-interest, ideology, and the role of the individual. The role of the individual played a very big role, as all the conflict was based around Fidel Castro's implementation of communism. Here is a translated transcript from Spanish about his response to the Bay of Pigs invasion in May 1st, 1961.
Rights do not come from size. Rights does not come from one country being bigger than another. That does not matter. We have only limited territory, a small nation, but our rights is as respectable as that of any country, regardless of its size. It does not occur to us to tell the people of the United States what system of government they must have. Therefore, it is absurd for Mr. Kennedy to take it into his head to tell us what kind of government he wants us to have here. That is absurd.
It occurs to Mr. Kennedy to do that only because he does not have a clear concept of international law or sovereignty. Who had those notions before Kennedy? Hitler and Mussolini. They spoke the same language of force. It is a fascist language. We heard it in the years before Germany's attack on Czechoslovakia. These are reactionary and pro-fascist, afraid of the advance of a socialist system, preferred even domination by Hitler. We heard that language on the eve of the invention of Denmark, Belgium, Poland, and so forth. It is a right of might. This is the only right Kennedy advances in claiming the right to interfere in our country. The U.S. government says that a socialist regime here threatens U.S. security, but what threatens the security of North American people is the aggressive polity of the warmongers of the United States. Therefore, the one who threatens the security of the United States is not Cuban revolutionary government, but the aggressor and aggressive government of the United States.
As we mentioned before, the different ideologies during the Cold War, being capitalism and communism, created a huge division between the countries each one was supported by. These two were the different systems and branches of thought throughout the conflicts between Cuba and the US, and they relate to one of the 5 keys stated: ideology.
For this part, I will be saying what capitalism means, and Marta will be talking about communism. Ownership of the means of production and on individual economic freedom should be allowed. The government has no control over the businesses and companies, and only individuals who invest are able to decide what to do with them.
I disagree, Blanca. I think that no private ownership of property should be allowed. The government has to have all control over businesses and companies, so it's their decision what shapes the direction of those, instead of being the people who own it, the ones who have control over it.
Furthermore, governments should not interfere with the rights of individuals to make their own living.
Well, I think that governments should make sure that everyone's needs are being met.
When people compete against one another, they achieve greater things by competition. Individuals are able to create a better outcome of their work, which will eventually lead to more prosperity.
Well, I think cooperation works better than competition, so when people work together as equals, they achieve greater things.
Some people have more than others because they make better use of their abilities and make greater efforts, so it makes sense that they have more.
Well, I think that's unfair, and no one should have more than anyone else. Everybody's needs are equally important.
Since America's ideology and economic benefit were both covered by capitalism, it was extremely important for them to maintain this economic construct. Therefore, when Cuba turned communist, the U.S. resorted to an invasion, in hopes that doing so would protect their national security. However, since it was against Cuba's sovereignty rights to enter the country without a solid reason, J.F.K. attempted to keep the invasion under the radar, in order to stay out of trouble with the United Nations. Regarding the invasion, America used Cuban exiles trained by the CIA as soldiers, for them not to have a direct connection to the invasion. Nevertheless, it was clear to Fidel Castro and Cuba's authorities that the U.S. was behind the attack. This proves how the U.S.'s interest was a leading factor to the invasion, as their decision-making became poor, as they started feeling fear towards a break in their national security.
I think you all got it now. Summarizing, ideology and self-interest, as Blanca just said, were linked together, and these 2 of the 5 keys have a huge influence on the event of the Bay of Pigs invasion. Cuba was a communist country by the influence of Castro, while the U.S. followed the capitalist philosophy under the lead of Kennedy. As we discussed before, communism and capitalism were the 2 rival ideologies during the Cold War, and these 2 countries had rival political systems, which led them to oppose each other.
Therefore, ideology, self-interest, and the role of the individual were essentially the causes for the three-day battle in the Bay of Pigs. As during the Cold War, Russia introduced a type of ideology that some countries, like Cuba, adopted, and others, like the US, profoundly rejected. I hope this explanation cleared all the doubts regarding the Bay of Pigs invasion.
See you next time, and thanks for listening.
Es que me estaba aguantando la tos.
Estaba muriendo.
Me estaba aguantando la tos.